welcome to stage 14 of the Domestique Cooldown. We had a pretty big mountain stage today. We saw a big fight for the breakaway, and there was no breakaway established until after the first intermediate sprint, which came quite a ways into the stage. The intermediate sprint was won by Jonathan Milan, and then the breakaway finally took place on the very bottom slopes of the Col de Tourmalet, which was the first of 4 climbs for the stage. The stage itself was 182 kilometers from Pau to Luchon-sur-Bagné. We had 4 of these climbs, which meant that anyone that was going to contest the stage would have to be a pretty good climber, and the breakaway was largely made up of climbers. We saw quite a big group, which was animated on the early slopes of the Tourmalet by Thymen Arensman, initially setting the pace and making most of this breakaway group uncomfortable and preventing the group staying too large, also allowing the group to get a decent gap on the peloton. We then saw Martinez go solo for the first 2 of these peaks to extend his lead in the KOM classification. Noticeably in the peloton, on the early slopes of the Tourmalet, we saw Remco Evenepoel look absolutely cooked at the back of the peloton, and then look absolutely cooked off the back of the peloton, and then look absolutely cooked in the team car, and he pulled out of the race. We then saw a largely sustained tempo set on the front of the peloton by UAE Team Emirates for the majority of the rest of the stage, which allowed the breakaway to hang with never too much of an advantage around the 3 to 4 minute mark most of the stage, until we saw Thymen Arensman and his teammate Carlos Rodriguez on the front of the breakaway, and then Arensman going solo on the Peresord, the penultimate climb of the day. At this point, the rest of the breakaway stopped really working cohesively, and Arensman was able to get quite a decent lead coming into the final climb, which he held until the end. The final gap was Thymen Arensman 1 minute ahead of the peloton. Within the peloton, we had a pretty big increase in the pace with 3 kilometers to go because of a Jonas Vingegaard attack. At this point, it looked like it might be somewhat exciting until Pogacar closed the gap to this attack in the seat with his mouth closed, and at no point looked in too much difficulty. And then we saw these 2 fight it out for second and third place closely in front of the other riders, which we will name shortly. But Pogacar, never in too much doubt, he ended up coming across the line for second with another small time gap of 4 seconds ahead of Jonas Vingegaard, just to rub some salt into the purely metaphorical wounds, as Jonas is one of the few riders left in the race not to hit the deck yet. But nonetheless, he will be feeling a little bit battered and bruised after getting beaten for the 3rd day in a row by Tadej Pogacar. Jonas in 3rd, Felix Gall in 4th, who put in a really good ride, looked at a point there like he was going to take some seconds on these 2 guys, but took some seconds on the rest of his competition. Florian Lipowitz looking really solid in 5th. Oscar Onley in 6th. Ben Healy, a really good ride in the mountain, 7th. Primoz Roglic 8th. And Tobias Holland Johannesson, noticeable for being in the breakaway the whole day, still managed to come across the line in 9th at 3 minutes behind the winner. And Kevin Vauquelin in 10th. Aidan Burgess, what are your first thoughts on this epic mountain stage?
It's definitely one I'm glad I didn't have to ride. Some of those sections looked really sketchy, and I think my mate Mark Storer was feeling about the same, because he was taking a leaf out of Remco's book, and it looked like Remco had a look at the conditions riding up the Tourmalet and just said, "Fuck that! I don't need this in my life." Called the team car over and said, "I'm done." And there were a couple of scratchings today. Skelmoser seemed to be caught up in a pretty bad crash. I missed that because I was spending time with my wife.
I managed to watch that, and he just plowed into a traffic island, really similar to how he crashed in Paris-Nice earlier this year. So he's not going to be liking the road furniture in the south of France, because it's the second time it's taken him out of a race when he's been targeting some results there. And yeah, he didn't look in too good a way, had some attention from the race doctor, and then pulled out shortly after another concussion test we saw. But yeah, definitely some bad luck again for him. And yeah, the Little Trek team, I guess, has at least the green jersey to target. But apart from that, they were going to be struggling to do much in the mountains from here on, I think.
Look, to be fair, he was out of contention, I think, for anything but a stage win at this point. But it was a rubbish time to have a crash because they were coming up to that intermediate sprint from what I saw. And so his entire team was focused on getting the sprint points. And so the poor guy, I had a look and he was 4 minutes down. He's riding by himself. He's trying to get as much help as he can by holding onto doors and stuff. But when you're riding back to a peloton that's charging into a sprint, I think part of it was just he knew even if he tried to go through today's stage, he wasn't making the time cut at that point. He's just riding for the entire stage by himself. So that one sucks. We've got Steph Krass from Total Energies. I don't even know the bloke. I'm sure he's lovely. And Brian Cockard from Cofidis has withdrawn from the race today, which is a shame. But Cofidis
did you see the Cockard lowdown after he won your Dickhead of the Day? He did break his finger on a musette, it was, and then he just committed to doing the time trial yesterday with a broken finger. Kudos to him because he knew he wasn't going to start today. He just said, right, well, I've got a broken finger. It's quite safe to do the time trial. Then I'm not going to have to touch the brakes on because it's all uphill. And he just did basically not quite a lap of honour, but a ramp of honour up the climb yesterday, knowing that he wasn't going to start. But kudos to him for sticking it out with a broken finger throughout that stage, despite winning the Dickhead of the Day. And then, doing one last wave goodbye to everyone. And then now he's going to be have his finger in ice for the rest of the week, I think.
So I had a mate that was driving, he was a passenger in Sydney when we were in our sort of early 20s and young, dumb and stupid. We were going about, I wasn't in the car, but he told the story, going about 80 kilometres an hour down one of the roads, and he stuck his hand out to try and tap a cone or a witch's hat. And yeah, he broke his hand doing that. So I can understand how it would happen. I've often wondered what I would do if someone asked me if I would be like a soigneur for a day, and I'd be terrified. I would be so worried about bringing a rider down or something. I think the fact that you guys take bottles and the Mizettes and stuff, it's just mental. So you know what? Fair play to him. It's easy to call him a dickhead from the sidelines, but I've literally never grabbed anything from on a bike ride. I stop and go into the service station. So yeah, I mean, who am I to critique the bloke? But yeah, that's a shame because it's been a rough tour for Cofidis so far. They seem to be doing everything that they can to make it more catastrophic, and having Brian Cockard pull out is a bit of a shame. So yeah, anyway, good to know that he can rest his finger now and yeah, lick his wounds, I guess. Aside from that, I was not taking heaps of notes. The young riders, again, like Florian Lipowitz is now in third place, I think, overall. Let me just double check that.
Yeah, he's third place since Remco's pulled out. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, you don't ever want to take a spot from someone pulling out, but even if Remco tried to push through today, Lipowitz was going to be in third place. And I think really it's a shame for Lipowitz that Remco did pull out, because I think Lipowitz would have taken that on his own merit, irrespective of whether Remco pulled out or not. I think Lipowitz is looking like the best of the rest when you think about Poggy and then Vingegaard. Lipowitz is the one that's looking the best. It's just a question. The only question I have with him is, can he maintain it for the final week? And we'll get to that in a second, because we had a question from, I got two questions. I put not a poll, but like a story up asking for some questions. I got two. So that's better than the none that we've got in the past. So yeah, I've got two in my pocket to bring out later, and both of them sort of focus on, well, I think Lipowitz and how he's going to go in that section. So Yeah, aside from that, all I would like to say is I think it was a fantastic stage. This is really what we've been wanting. We talked about this yesterday. We really wanted the break to get away, and the break did get away. I sent you a message when Ben O'Connor was looking pretty good, sort of saying, my pick's looking pretty good. And then I think literally the moment I hit send on that, Ben O'Connor dropped back from that. We do have the Lazarus Award coming up. I was going to give it to Ben O'Connor, but then he dug himself into a very deep grave by the end of that. Did you have someone that you noticed that just seemed to die 1,000 deaths today?
Mine's probably Ben Healy, and he didn't die 1,000 deaths, but he was hunting for the break early on, which I sort of thought, okay, he's been doing a lot recently. It's going to be hard for him, especially on this kind of stage. He's not known for being great in the high mountains anyway. And he was hunting for the break early on, made the break, and Arensman then started ripping pretty early on the Tourmalet, and Healy just decided, no, this is too hard. I'm going back to the peloton. And at this point, I just thought, okay, this is going to be the end of his GC ambition or stage ambitions and GC ambitions. And then he was just able to stay in this group until there was only 8 riders left on the final climb. So um, it was clearly a conscious decision that, okay, they're going to start riding for him for a GC top 10, which is fair enough because he's now sitting in 9th position on the GC. And he has got, he's 18 minutes, 40 seconds down. Rodriguez 22 minutes 57 down, and then 11th place 24 minutes 18 seconds down, which is Jordan Jagat, who was put in a solid ride in the breakaway as well for Team Total Energies. Not a rider that I have raced against or seen much of before, but he sort of it's good that, like we said yesterday, you get sort of these stories, riders get a chance to pop out and show themselves on the biggest stage in the breakaways, which he did, and now he's sitting 11th on GC at the Tour de France, and only one more rider stepping into the team car away from a top 10 in the biggest race in the world. But back to Ben Healy, I think he looks like he's really targeting that top 10 on GC, which would be big for EF education, because that's not something that they, I assume, would have thought was possible coming into the tour, or maybe they did, but regardless, already, as we touched on, a good tour for them. And then to have Healy now doing these kind of rides in the high mountains and looking like notching up a top 10 is a really good sign for them.
Anything that EF pulls from here is extras. It's cherries on the cake at this point. And at the moment, it's going to be a cake overburdened with cherries, because on top of that, Ben Healy is a minute 21 outside of number one in the best young rider as well. And both the time trials are out of the way, which I don't think is Ben Healy's strong suit, which means that, there's the potential that he can pick up more time in that area, especially if Lipowitz fades. It's Onley's first Tour de France from memory, which means Healy's the one with the experience in here. He's done this before. He knows what it's like to go deep into one of these Grand Tours. I think he's a bit of a dark horse for the best young rider classification as well, which again would be absolutely huge for a team like EF, which I think because of their marketing, people often think that they're a bigger team than they are, but their budget is quite small. If you've seen the Tour de France Unchained, their budget is.
I've got to pull you up on that. That's pure marketing, like double bluff almost, in that their budget's actually much higher than they let on. It's just that's their marketing strategy towards sponsors,
Right.
to play the small violin and make it look like they've never got any money, to try and get sponsors to come in. But if you look at the amount that they're paying riders, their budget is clearly okay. They're by no means the same level as these top teams, but I think a lot of what is spoken about by JV Jonathan Borders, their main guy in these documentaries, he loves crying poor because it has worked for sponsors for so many years, and the reality is that they actually still are a hell of a lot better off than a lot of the teams in this race, and they're able to pay riders quite handy salaries. So you can't read too much into that side of things. At the same time, I would be quite happy to see them continue to get decent sponsors, because they're doing good things for the sport.
Well, consider me humbled then. But on that, I think so. My one today, my Lazarus Award goes to Johannesson, who was in the break. And when the attacks started, um, when Arensman attacked, he faded back to the main group of guys, and I thought he was going to get very quickly spat out the back, a bit like Ben Healy, but Johannesson went a bit deeper into the race, and he managed to hang on, and he finished in ninth place today, which I think for a guy that spent pretty much the whole day in the breakaway to again be able to hold on to that select group and finish one spot down on Primoz Roglic is incredible. So a big one for the breakaway today. They get both of the awards there. Did you have a domestique of the day?
Yeah, my domestique of the day, it was these mountain days we see a lot of work by the domestiques. Even before the break went away, I liked the domestique, and it was referred to really well on the commentary I was listening to as if it was a Derny race, which a Derny race, for those that don't know, is having a motorbike in front of each rider in the race. It's often on the velodrome in Germany. You get these Derny crits where you have a motorbike rider ride around in front of each rider, and they just have to follow their motorbike as quick as they can. So for a stage like this, the breakaway is trying to get away on flat roads, and you've got riders
That's
like, yeah, that's an
so
actual
how,
kind of
how many
race.
motorbikes do you have going around a crit like a
30. If there's 30 riders in the race, there's 30 Derny bikes. They're not full on Harley Davidsons. They're those lame little pedal motorbike assisted things, and now they're probably even e-bikes. But they're for I don't want to be the person that ruins Santa Claus, but they're mostly fixed races. They're not really racing. They've decided before who's going to win. But on the track, you'll get some that are genuinely raced, and they'll maybe have 8 riders and 8 motorbikes. But it seemed a bit like that at the start of today, because you've got this flat road, slightly uphill actually, and they were still doing over 50 k's an hour in fighting for that breakaway. But you had riders like Sepp Kuss trying to get into the breakaway, but he's someone that's sub 60 kilos probably, or very low 60 kilos, and just doesn't have the watts to burn to get away from a peloton. So he's getting towed around by Campenarts and Eduardo Affini, and they're just basically trying to tow him off the front and give him that gap. And each team was doing similar kinds of things. I saw Durbridge trying to do it for some of the Jayco riders. And just a funny thing to watch these climbers try and be towed off the front by their heavyweight teammates. But they don't get my domestique of the day. My domestique of the day is someone who has actually been a rider in that situation, helping their climbers on the flats. But Callum Scottson, who just today climbed out of his skin. I think he has been showing some good climbing performances this year since switching to the decathlon team, but he was still there at the end, and I think he single-handedly helped Felix Gall get that gap at the end. Felix Gall didn't look like he was that comfortable. It was just the fact that Callum basically stepped out and rode next to the UAE train on the final climb and said, look how good I am. And then Felix Gall went, oh, hang on a sec, with my domestiques doing this that was supposed to be gone 2 climbs ago, I better make something of it. And then he attacked after that. So I think Callum Scottson deserves the domestique of the day for me.
I'd back you on that. Yeah, he had a fantastic ride and absolutely rode Felix Gall into a position. It was his work up that climb pacing him that allowed him to go off the front and attack there. And it's fortunate for Felix that he's just in a position where none of those guys in that group were at all concerned about him going off the front, and so he was given enough rope there. And a fantastic ride. My domestique of the day is Arensman, because I think he was supposed to be starting off as domestique for Rodriguez, but then when Rodriguez was just dead, Arensman then just went off and ended up winning the stage by himself. But that certainly wasn't the plan, and he was really putting himself in a bit of a hole at the start of that stage, trying to pull Rodriguez through.
Yeah, definitely looked like that. At the start of the first climb, he was the least popular man in the break because he was just riding other riders off the wheel, and these were good riders like Sepp Kuss just couldn't follow at the start. And I was sort of thinking at that point, why is he riding this hard? Like, At that point, I was thinking he's riding for himself, and I thought, well, there's no pressure on Ineos. Then no one's expecting them to do all the work. Why is he the one pushing the pace? And then you had noticed Rodriguez was there. Thought, okay, that's fair enough. Clearly, Rodriguez is feeling good, even still very early in the stage. I don't know if this is the right place to do it, but clearly he's just on an amazing day, and the fact he was able to hold on. We often see this kind of thing in the high mountains that when riders are good, they're just good, and it doesn't matter so much how much work they're doing on the earlier climbs because it's hurting everyone else as well. So it becomes a lot less tactical than I think people give credit for once we're in these just back-to-back long climbs, and it's just if you've got really good legs, then you've got a good chance of winning at this point.
Well, the draft benefit is not as significant. That being said, and this I was going to put in the stuff you might not have noticed today, but at 7% at the start of the second last climb. So what was that? I had it.
Parasword, I think.
Yes. So he was going 30 kilometers an hour at 7%, which is what my bunch goes along at on a flat. So, you know, there is some draft benefit there. But I was speaking to Simon Pilot when we were in China and asking why he always was going off the front by himself and whether he didn't like the people in his team or something. And he said, well, the thing for him is it means that on the climbs, he doesn't have to follow someone else's wheel. He can set his own pace and he knows what his own pace is. And then on the descents, you're not worried about people being in front of you. You're not worried about people going up the back of you when you slow down for corners and stuff. So you can take it at your own speed. And I think that worked in Arensman's favour today. There were some pretty sketchy descents where you probably, and I come back to Storer, it really just didn't look like he was comfortable being in the bunch today. But you don't have the spray from the guy in front of your wheel coming in your face the whole way down a descent, which would be mental. I think it just suited him.
Yeah, and he, on that final descent into the final climb, so the descent off the Parasword, he basically extended his lead by almost a minute on that descent. So clearly a very good descender, clearly prepared to risk a little bit more than the others. And as you said, it was a group behind. So they're getting a bit of spray off each other, not able to take their own lines into corners. That minute is what he ended up winning by in the end. So it's not always that simple of just, if it was that simple, everyone would just ride on their own the whole way through every stage. But there is going to be times like what we've got in this stage where basically there's no valley roads. When you've got big valley roads, riding by yourself is going to tend to be a lot less efficient because in those valleys it's a bit flatter. You tend to get either a big headwind or a big tailwind. As soon as you've got a big headwind, it's going to be better in a bunch. Today, they're never really in valleys. They're just going down one climb, straight up another, down one climb, straight up another. So in that situation, it's essentially just every man for himself. Like, you're not getting that much sit on the descents. You're not getting that much sit on the climbs. If you've got the legs, you may as well ride away and make the most of it. And I think just the fact that he had the right idea in pushing it really hard at the base of that final climb, because if it looks like at the moment, if Pogacar gets a sniff of adding another stage win to his tally, then he's going to be pretty keen to do it if he's in that situation. Today, it just meant that when Jonas attacked and Pogacar saw weakness, he did test that once with one of his own attacks, but the fact that he was still 2 minutes behind at that point from the stage win, he didn't continue on with it. I think if he was only 40 seconds behind at that point, he's going to go all out and go for another stage win. So it was a really smart move, I think, by Arensman, as much as you don't need that much race smarts when you're riding by yourself in front, just to put in that extra effort at the start of the climb to make sure he still had that gap at the top.
Yeah, totally. So then we move on to the dickhead of the day. So I'll take this first because I'm worried that you might steal mine. Mine is twofold, but I'll go with my first one, which was Tutor Pro Cycling. At the first descent, you see Alaphilippe has taken a fan's sign and is stuffing it down his front for insulation, and Storer had no gloves, no jacket on that first descent. It's misty, cold, and I think that affected Storer for the rest of the race. And the fact that Alaphilippe's got to steal a fan's sign, I'm making a reel about that tomorrow, 100%. And he's just stuffing it down his shirt. It's this, these are the reason why people love Lulu. But yeah, I think they get my dickhead of the day for just not being prepared for that. Every other team had jackets on except for Poggy, who seems to be a bit of a sadist and no gloves, no jacket the whole day. But yeah,
Yeah, I think Poggy might just be from the Slovenian background, just used to riding and that kind of stuff. I don't think it was crazy cold, but it's just more the length of these descents. So yeah, they're going from 2,100 meters down to 850 meters over the space of 17K. So yeah, even though it's pretty quick, they're still going to be descending, like not pedaling for 15 minutes at least, and after they're wet at the top just from the mist and whatever, they're going to need something to just stop getting too cold. And yeah, especially for these guys that have been doing heat training, riding in heat the whole of the first week, they're going to feel pretty rotten. So I think you're on something there about Stora not feeling too great, and that's just a simple one of, even we just saw some riders took on their jackets 5K from the top and just stuffed it in their jersey until they were near the top to chuck it on, and that's something.
Martinez was a good example
Yeah,
of that. You could
Martinez.
see him stuffing the down the back
Yep.
of his jersey. Yep.
And one thing that I have learned through being in that situation myself, and most of us Aussies definitely aren't experienced with it because we don't have to ride in high mountains much. But one thing
And we
I've
don't
learned,
ride in the rain.
yeah, that too, just fair weather cyclists in general. But one thing when riding in the mountains is, in racing in the mountains, even if you're doing your grand fondo at home, just put the jacket on earlier than you think, because you riding with an unzipped jacket for the last kilometer of a climb isn't going to be too much of a hindrance. Yeah, you might get some hot arms, and then in the last few hundred meters of the climb, you can ride with no hands, impress your mum, and do up the zip. But then just get yourself organised a bit earlier than you think before you head down the climb. I don't think too many of the riders. I don't think Stora needs this advice. He should by now have understood that. I think his issue is just not getting the jacket. But yeah, in those situations, it's funny if you just think, oh, I'll just grab it at the top and then do it. If you grab it at the top, you're already hitting the first switchback by the time you're trying to get it on, and then it is really difficult. And then trying to do that on a descent is a recipe for disaster. So yeah, I think that's worthy of a decade of the day. Mine's probably going to be controversial here and may piss off an entire nation, but for me, I've got to give it to Remco. He is, yeah, clearly on a terrible day today. Clearly was on a terrible day. You could tell from early on. He clearly hasn't looked that great the last few days. But for me, I was just thinking about it when I wrote his name down and thought, is this too harsh? And then I thought, hang on, is there any other sport and then any other job where if you're having a shitty day, you just go home and pack up and leave? And I can't really think of any. If you can imagine any team sport, if a player just wasn't playing well and just decided to go. Now, if it comes out, I'm sure it'll come out that he's feeling a bit under the weather because he was clearly a long way off. And if you've got a major injury, anything that's going to put your health at risk longer term, completely fair enough. But if he's just, not feeling that great and pulled the pin, then I think that's just, there's not really an excuse for running up the white flag. And maybe this is just me because I was thinking I've probably become way too desensitized to suffering off the back of the peloton and just riding through and finishing an hour behind because I have so much experience myself of doing this. And yeah, maybe for the top guys, it's a bad thing to normalize just being rubbish and suffering off the back. But for me, I just thought, like, plenty of us have rubbish days on the job, whether it's our job is riding a bike, whether it's being a runner that has a rubbish run, whether it's any other sport, whether it's your day at work and you don't just pull the pin and go home because it's not working well, especially when you've got a team of 50 people, I'd say, at this race amongst the cyclists and staff and coaches at home checking in every day, this kind of stuff, working to make him as good as he can be. Sure, his GC hopes were completely gone regardless, but I think there's still opportunities later in the tour to go for a stage win to repay the favours that everyone has done for him, to at least fight it out and provide a good example for the fans watching as well. What's your take on this? Am I being too harsh on him?
There's actually a question that I just had come through on exactly that, which is, are you buying that Remco isn't sick? Is this just a lack of winter training? I agree with you. I think this is an opportunity for Remco to win some fans by showing that he's like, you have other ambitions in this race. Just sit with Malia and go over this stage with Malia and just nurse your sprinter through and be a domestique. Like, yes, you might be sick. Sivakov was sick earlier, it seemed, and he hung around so that he could be here in other days, and he did a great job today for Poggy. Looking at your team's larger ambitions to just go home because your GC hopes are gone. Now, granted, it would be devastating. Remco desperately wants to win a Tour de France. It would be so tough. I understand how Remco feels because I am born in a generation where there are about 100,000 better cyclists than me. So I understand what it's like to not be the best cyclist in your generation. But at the same time, you've got the opportunity to say, it's not my day, but I'm working for my team. And you would genuinely win fans doing that. People would be really impressed to see that. And I think it would change a lot of the criticism that Remco cops about the fact that he spits the dummy and about the fact that he doesn't have maybe the mental fortitude to go this far into a Grand Tour. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that line of thinking as well, and it's sort of just making me think that the times also that it would really piss me off when I've worked the whole day, not the whole day in this case, but the whole tour for someone, and when I've been on terrible days and still tried to do everything I can to get them one extra feed or get them into one extra corner in good position. And then when they're on a rubbish day, they just pull the pin and you hear in the radio, they've left the race. And then you just think, well, why did I do all of that work? And then also, yeah, just the fact that for the domestiques, like the title of this podcast, for the domestiques working, they always have to show up regardless of if they're on a good day or a bad day. It would be so strange to see a domestique just pull the pin without missing time cut. Sorry. And then, if the team leaders, it seems a little bit too normal for me that they just get to pull the pin when it's not going too well. And I understand when there's greater ambitions, like we saw last year with Roglic when he had, okay, the Vuelta's coming or the Olympics are coming, whatever it is, let's target those instead. This is the biggest race. This is what Remco did all those hours to come back for from his bad crash over the winter, what he's put in all the work for. Yeah, he's not going to achieve his goal. It was pretty evident from early on in that first climb of the day that he's not going to reach the podium in Paris, but have some secondary goals. Or, as you said, yeah, I really like that thought of just help your teammate out for a change and, yeah, win some fans that way. He won some fans handing off a bottle to the crowd, which does look great for TV. Honestly, that's the bare minimum, and I kind of that it is really cool for the sport. But every single rider is doing that every single moment of every stage. It just gets shown when the big dogs do it. So that's the bare minimum. It was really cool that he could do that in that moment. I just think he could set even a better example for that kid that he handed the bottle to by going, hey, I'm on a shocker. I'm still going to just battle through this and get through something that's really hard despite not getting anything to show for it at the end of the day, because that is cycling and that is life. Sometimes you just got to get through hard stuff without getting anything back for it.
You'd like to think that Remco, even when he's sick, could make over these climbs at the same time as Tim Millian. That's all I'm going to say about it. So yeah, that one comes from the Bill H. We might go through to some of the other questions, and all of these are based on essentially the same iteration, which is what is the podium going to look like? So the first one is from Max Gould, who is, I believe, Australia's junior TT champion.
Yep.
So getting some, getting some royalty here. He wants
the
to know
tour in a few years, I reckon.
Yeah. So Maxi wants to know, can Lipowitz hold on to the podium?
Personally, I think yes. He looks like he is the third best climber there. He's just a bit of a diesel that seems like he's not going to do anything to push himself over the limit. Yeah, it's a bit of a mystery how the third week will go, but the team's pretty dialed in terms of he's going to have probably the best one best guy to learn off, aside from the big two in Roglic there in the team, to get those tips on how to manage the third week, how to not have one of those bad days where you lose 5 minutes, which I think is the key to doing a podium GC result in this race, is just avoiding one of those shockers of a day. It's pretty clear now that no one can go with the big two, and he would have known that before, but he just looks like he's going to be rock solid in that position where he's not going to lose too much time, and he's got a pretty decent buffer on fourth at the moment.
Yeah. I am not so. Before today's stage, I was not so sold. Every stage that he manages to put in a performance like today builds my belief in him being able to do it. But yeah, it's always a bit of a question when you come to these guys that have never done something. Like Lipowitz was in the Giro, but the level of the Tour is that step higher again, and there's just all of the circus and all of the energy that you're burning outside of that, the excitement that I guess would come with it, again, coming from someone who's never raced anything above a B grade crit. So I mean, at the end of the day, who am I to comment on this? But yeah, look, I think Red Bull has the podium, the third step on the podium. I'm just not sure that it's coming from Lipowitz. I think Roglic could end up coming through as a bit of a dark horse at the end of this. But I haven't seen how much time he lost today. He had a fantastic time trial yesterday, and I think he's sort of been playing around, maybe hiding his form a little bit and just having a good time at the Tour, but he's actually not in a bad position. I think they're giving Lipowitz the opportunity to have a crack at this, but Roglic is there in the background, and I think he could come through if he needs to.
Yeah, he's still within 3 minutes of that podium spot, and as we've seen, like that can really just change rapidly, especially if we get just a day where the race is really taken on much earlier than the final climb like it was today. So it really wouldn't surprise me, and I think it's a pretty good call that probably one of those two will end up on the podium in Paris.
Yeah, and on that, I don't know why I can't get but yeah, on that, here we go. The people in front of Roglic are all under the age of 25. So they're all young riders, for all of them except, I don't know why my general rankings, here we go. Yeah, all of them are Vacalin. Is that his first Tour de France?
Second, he won a stage last year, but it's his first one going at the GC for 3 weeks.
And then we've got Onley, first Tour de France, Lipowitz, first Tour de France. So, yeah, there's a lot of inexperience above him. And, yeah, I think Lipowitz having Roglic working with him is a benefit to him. But, yeah, I think he could come through as a bit of a dark horse. So I think that knocks out. So that was Maxi's, but that is also Chris Rides Mountain Bikes, who's on the podium in Paris now that Remco has dropped out. I think it's either Lipowitz or Roglic. You seem to think it's Lipowitz.
Yep, that's my call.
And then if it's Lipowitz, Andy Wilkinson's is also the yellow jersey looks wrapped up. What about the white jersey? Only Lippo or Kev Vacalin. I think Vacalin showed some cracks today in his climbing. I just don't think he's there on the same level as Onley and Lipowitz. So yeah, I think Lippo's got the best young rider sewn up.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would like to see a few of these guys have a crack at doing what Tobias Holland Johannesson did today, and what we've seen some riders in the bottom half of the top 10 do in the past, and just go for the early break and go for the GC placing that way as well. There's not so much to lose because, as we talked about, it's not necessarily the worst thing to be in front of the race and not in the peloton from earlier on in these stages. I think there will be a bit of infighting between these teams in terms of teams will go to defend the white jersey. Red Bull will jump on the front if they see one of those riders in the breakaway, but at the same time, Red Bull don't quite have the full team to be able to close something down if the race does get a bit out of control. So just purely from a spectator standpoint, it would be nice to see these guys race for it in another way rather than just a battle of who can hold on to Pogacar's wheel the longest, who can actually take the race to them before and get that head start, even at the way that we saw Felix Gall do it today, and just attack a little bit before those big guys do, get a little bit up the road and do it that way around. It's easy to say you have to have the legs to actually ride away from these guys at any point during the race, and that's by no means easy, but yeah, it makes a bit of a spectacle if they do it a different way rather than just a battle of who can hold on the longest.
Yeah, absolutely. And you might not be able to hit Pogacar, but it would be interesting to see some of these guys trying to take a whack at Vingegaard. He is looking very strong, and I'm not suggesting that any of them could actually go at him, but you can assume that Poggy can follow most attacks. But I would like to see some of them put the squeeze on Vingegaard instead of just accepting that that second place is sewn up. Have a look. His team is looking.
Yeah,
I don't
they'd
want
be
to say
asking a lot of
shit.
questions.
They're looking shit.
Yeah, big surprises there from some of their guys. Obviously, Simon Yates and Sepp Kuss in the break never really looked like they were comfortable the whole day. And then we
Yates did
had,
nothing. He dropped
yeah,
off the back before the final climb today. Yeah.
and then Jorgensen's been a big shock for the tour. I really tipped him as someone that just the way his trajectory's been the last few years, he's just been getting better at every single thing that he focuses on. This has obviously been a big focus of his season. I really thought he'd be around that 5th place mark on GC, and he just hasn't looked like it the last few days. So don't really know the cause of that within the team, whether it's just too much emphasis on that first week, whether they've just got a bit of sickness going around, or it's just really a case of the fact that their leader has basically been getting his head kicked in the last few days and the rest of them are walking around with their tail in between their legs. And when their morale's not good on the team bus and not good at the dinner table, it actually does make a huge difference to the performance of the riders on the road as well.
It must be tough as well because you are everyone that UAE hasn't thrown a massive paycheck at is who's at Visma. And so at the end of the day, you can try and build as strong a team as you can, but UAE will just chuck a bigger paycheck at anyone. And so it is like you are the second best team. As good as the team is, anyone on Visma, if they were good enough, would be on UAE. And I
Yeah,
think
like
that's
there's a few exceptions at the very top that Visma are definitely paying very well. But yeah, it is similar to what you said. I think the bigger worry for them is that it's not even UAE's best team as well. And Almeida's out, and Ayuso didn't even show up to the tour. So they're getting dropped by like the Kevin Vauquelins of the world, who Kevin Vauquelin is an amazing rider, but at the same time they would have sat down at the start of the tour and planned to have 5 guys still there when guys like Vauquelin and Ben Healy are still climbing in the front group. They would have just thought, okay, we still want to have all our climbing domestiques there and still able to rip it from that point, and they just haven't been at that level.
yeah. And I think at the end of the day, for Visma to be able to compete, sorry, my allergies have been playing up all day. For Visma to be able to compete, they need to be able to get on the front, and they're just not able to because UAE just has stronger riders that are able to put on. Every time Visma tries to get on the front, UAE chucks someone else on top that can push a harder pace, and Visma just starts shedding riders. So yeah, hopefully that changes in the latter half of this tour. But at the moment, yeah, I would say the only one that is performing, I think we're going to have to start playing Where's Wout again. The only
Yep.
one that I think's performing in here is Campenarts, and he's having
Yeah,
a
and
fantastic
Camp
tour.
Campenarts was incredible today, how long he was still there. And I thought that must be someone else has just borrowed his helmet for some reason, because how could he possibly still be there at that point? But he was really good, but then it didn't actually influence the race whatsoever, because at no point were they pulling and it didn't change what was going on in the race. So hopefully he can have similar legs when it really counts. And it would be cool to see him get into one of those moves and be a satellite rider, or actually get his own chance to go at a stage, because he's looked really good the whole tour.
So moving on to a stage that might actually, I guess, kind of suit someone like Campenaerts. So we got stage 15 tomorrow before a rest day. And this is Murray to Carcassonne.
Carcassonne.
Carcassonne, 3 kilometers. Those 0.3 kilometers must be really important. I never understand why they don't just end at 169 or just add an extra 700 meters and end it at 170 meters. But we've got an easier day today. So this is a sprint at 59.8 kilometers. It's a bit lumpy. It looks like my face when I was a teenager in that first half. And then we've got a Cat 3 climb, which looks like a wimp of a Cat 3 climb. But I think it must be the gradient that's pushed it up to there because it is tiny compared to the second Cat 3. So the first 1.7 kilometers at 7%, that's the Côte de Saint-Ferréol. Then the Côte de Sorezay is 6.2 at 5.5. And then we've got a Cat 2 at the end, which is strange because it's not the end of the climbing. The Cat 2 is about halfway up the Col de Fontbruno. So this is the Pas du Sang. 2.9 kilometers at 10.2%. And I think I nailed the pronunciation of that, except I'm pretty sure it's Pas du Sang.
Yeah.
The other ones are butchered, but
Pas du Sang is right, I would say.
Yeah. And then it's downhill towards the finish. So yeah.
Who's your tip?
MVDP.
Yeah, he's been looking good and he's been hunting breaks. I think this is the textbook breakaway stage. So the classic transition stage. We're heading away from the Pyrenees now towards the Alps, which we will be in the final week. So yeah, these ones are usually go to the breakaway. It's a little bit too hard for the sprinters to contest, no matter how well Milan is going. I don't see him getting over these. It's usually a massive fight for the break. Some lumpy roads at the start will help for that. My tip for the day is my man Luke Plapp to be, because he seems to have missed every single breakaway for the tour so far, yet clearly has very good legs, as we saw in the time trial a few days ago. I think it's going to play out that it'll require someone with enough climbing legs to get up these steep climbs, particularly the Pas du Sang, which is 3K of 9%, as you said, and then just a little bit of a plateau across the top. I think there'll be any rider that gets over there and then a bit of either a smaller group comes into the line, or my tip is someone like Luke Plapp or a Victor Campenaerts, if he's there, is another one suited to it, to just ride away on that flat section. If there's any lack of cooperation behind, then the last 40 Ks is predominantly downhill and it's going to be really hard to catch any small group off the front of that breakaway or solo rider. So my tip for tomorrow is that, and it should be a good one to watch the breakaway get a chance to fight it out again.
I think that's actually a good tip. Plappy looked fantastic in the time trial, on an uphill time trial. If he is in a break, he's shown that he's got the best climbing legs. 2.9 kilometers at 10.2% may actually be a bit too tough for Van der Poel. But another one that I think might be a shout is Quinn Simmons. He's been in every single one of these, and I think he might also be one that would be, judging by how he rode in that first week, I think he's pretty desperate for a stage win. So yeah, I think he's a similar kind of guy to Plappy as well, although maybe not as good on the time trial. Maybe if he got a haircut, he might be better. But
no need. Keep the mullet going.
I think that brings a wrap, and I've got to duck next door because I've got a 2.5-year-old crying for a dummy. So I'm going to jump in there. And Cyrus, this has been a pleasure. I think I'm feeling a bit like the riders at the moment. I'm pretty keen for our rest day. So we got tomorrow night, and then we got a night off.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, we've got to get through tomorrow first, and hopefully we've got a good stage to watch. So thanks for tuning in, guys. As we have said each episode, if you like this, share it with your mates. Let everyone know. Jump across to the Domestique platform, and thanks for listening.
Yeah. See you, everyone.
Cheers.